Morning, everybody. David Shapiro here. Quick update. I put out a call for people to interview because I want to revamp this channel and kind of focus on not just my ideas, but I want to talk to people. And I've had the privilege of talking to some really great people. I've got a handful of interviews, some podcasts lined up. So stay on the lookout for those. But in the meantime, what I wanted to do was kind of as 2022 winds down. Boy, was this another year. It wasn't quite as much of a dumpster fire as 2020 and 2021, but it was a year. And I wanted to end on a slightly more optimistic note. I am forever optimistic. My fiance says when I talk about the future, I get singularity sparkles in my eyes like an anime character. So I wanted to share that with you. So today we're going to talk about singularity sparkles and why I am super optimistic for 2023. I'm not even talking about the distant future. I'm talking about the next 12 months. So let's dive right in. So first, there was just a couple days ago news about net energy gain from what was it, the Lawrence Livermore Lab in America, in the U.S. So we have theoretically hit one of the biggest milestones in fusion research, which is the amount of energy that it takes to heat up hydrogen or helium and smush it together and get fusion. That for the last 70 years has taken more energy to get ignition than you get out of it. So why? There's a whole bunch of reasons. I don't want to unpack it. There's plenty of other great YouTube channels that go into details. Veritasium, Sabine Hossenfelder, like all kinds of people have great videos on that. But what I want to say is this is huge. I think that this is just a leak. I don't know if it has been confirmed yet. But if it's true, if we have had net gain, then whatever they did is this is going to set investment on fire. So the reason that I'm excited about this, I've been studying markets and economics on the side lately. So what this means is there's already a lot of investment in fusion. This is going to turn that up to 11. And the reason is because in the mind of investors and speculators, they're like, oh, well, if the Americans just figured out this critical step, that means it's possible, right? Because until now, fusion is always 20 years into the future, right? It's always something that is hypothetically possible. But this says that it is physically possible, that it has been demonstrated that you can get more energy out of fusion than you put in. So this represents a saltatory leap forward saying, okay, this is no longer theoretical, this is no longer hypothetical, it is actual, it is concrete, you can get more energy out of it, so now it's just a matter of making it commercially viable. So I expect that by this time next year, we are going to see an explosion not literal explosion, metaphorical explosion in investment in fusion, and hopefully more people around the world will get first light, first ignition, which the reason that fusion is so important is because fusion represents, one, safe energy, but two, also clean energy, but also hyperabundance of energy. So the sun is we already have a fusion reactor in the sky, right? And we can use it by growing plants. We can use it by collecting solar. We can harness tides, right, and waves and stuff. Granted, that's a gravity engine. But anyways, point being is fusion is already the most reliable power source to this planet. But if we can do it in a smaller scale locally, then you can do it all the time. It's difficult to say what fusion would unlock, because then problems like carbon, not a problem. Growing food, not a problem. Saltwater desalination, not a problem. If you have a hyperabundance of thermal energy, there's pretty much nothing you can't do, right? Like you can even, well, it would take a different kind of physics to like break the speed of light, so I'm not going to comment on that. But at least in terms of industrial things that we do, right? Anything mechanical or industrial suddenly the marginal cost becomes basically zero. And what I mean by marginal cost is the cost of making a ton of concrete when you have a hyperabundance of energy from fusion. The cost of making a ton of concrete is near zero. The cost of cultivating an acre of land is near zero, right? And so then fusion is probably one of the biggest technologies that will help us to get to a post-scarcity or hyperabundance economy, which, oh boy, you think people can't agree on economics now. Just wait till that happens. Okay, so that's number one. Fusion in 2023, keep your eyes on this space. It's going to get wild. All right, now, fusion might still be 5, 10, 20 years from being commercial, right? We like within this week, we had a huge breakthrough. But in the meantime, we're still going to need other kinds of energy, right? Because, between global geopolitical things, Russia, China, everyone else who's not getting along, fossil fuels are going to be, they're already unpopular, right? Because of climate change. But solar and wind in particular are becoming so cheap so quickly. And this actually reminds me, I forgot to add battery technology. There's more news coming out about better batteries and cheaper batteries. Anyways, renewables are accelerating. So people don't believe me when I say this. I have a friend actually who started their graduate program in this space. And before they started their graduate program, they were so angry about climate change. Every time the IPCC report came out, they're like, the world is ending. We're in trouble. And I'm like, no, we're not. No, we're not. Like, it's going to be fine. Like, this problem is solved. But it needs to be deployed, right? When I say the problem is solved, I don't mean that climate change is gone. I mean that from a technology standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, we have the capacity to become carbon neutral or carbon negative. Now it's just a matter of deployment. So that's why you see things like tax incentives and carbon credits, because the idea is, under neoliberal theory, is you incentivize the behavior you want to see. So, and you use financial incentives. So you create incentives to do for the market to do the things that you want. So it's like, okay, for every ton of carbon you offset, you get credits. For every kilowatt of solar you deploy, you get credits. Whatever. So anyways, that is working. And we are seeing this accelerate because, you might remember in the last, in 2015, they said, oh, it's going to be 2045 before we can even offset coal because coal is so cheap and so easy and so efficient. But the thing is the market has responded, right? And so all the biggest tech companies, GE, Honeywell, I can't remember, but those are two of the biggest ones that just like they churn out they know how to mass produce stuff. And so it's like, hey, we need to mass produce this. Let's do it. Let's get on it. And so that drives down the cost of solar panels and wind farms. But then also there's other things like it takes a while for banks to catch on, right? Like because you see like a solar farm like this takes investment, right? And like most energy generation, there's an upfront investment. But what is different about solar is that it's entirely upfront with very low operating costs because there's no mechanical parts, right? And when everything is solid state and you have no mechanical parts, the maintenance is very low. Pretty much all you have to do is replace these solar panels as they burn out, because they do. There's a mean time to failure of about, I think, 10 years or something. So that means after, by the time that 10 years has passed, you'll have replaced about half the panels. You have to keep them cleaned. Every now and then, bad wiring or bad components, you might have a bad inverter, but there's no fuel input, right? So with most energy generation, there's a fuel input, which is an ongoing operating cost. So, you have to, with coal or gas or oil, you have to have trains and tankers constantly delivering fuel. But with solar, the fuel is, a billion miles away in the sun. We're just collecting, there's no reason that you couldn't do this with a fusion reactor where you just line a big enough reactor with solar panels. I mean, there's lots of physics reasons why that wouldn't work because the proximity, right? If you put something too close to a fusion reaction, it gets burned up. But anyways, my point is that this is very clean and the fuel is a long ways away and it's also functionally infinite. So anyways, point being is, people are thinking about when are we going to break even on carbon? People aren't thinking about what happens when we have 10 times more energy than we do today available to us through renewables, right? Renewables alone can get us to a state of hyperabundance. Maybe not quite, 100x like fusion could, but we can get to 5x, we can get to 10x. And I suspect that this number is going to continue to go down because this time last year, this number was like 2032. So in the space of a year, we've lowered the threshold by another 2, 5, 7 years. I don't remember exactly. But the point is that this number of break even and replacement has gone down every year faster than a rate of 1 year per year. So 2023 might be the last year that we use more fossil fuels than renewables. That's a bold claim, but even if it's not true, we're going to be closer, and that's a good thing, right? I need more coffee, as you can tell. This stuff is very exciting to me. We are living through the most interesting time in the human species since like the invention of fire and wheels, right? Like it's difficult to say what's going to happen from these kinds of things. Okay, so that's energy. Let's talk about computing. So the rest of this video is going to be talking about different kinds of computing, such as quantum computing, photonics, and AI. Obviously, that's where I got my start. That's my main jam, is AI. So obviously, there is a global, like, I don't want to say arms race because it's not a weapon, or at least I guess it could be weaponized. But everyone is working on quantum computing. All over Europe, America, and China are all competing for quantum supremacy. IBM, I think, has the best chance of doing it. So from a tech industry perspective, IBM started pivoting about, 8 years ago or so, when they started selling off their commodity hardware. So they sold a ThinkPad off to Lenovo. They're like, this is commodity. We don't want to focus on this anymore. They pivoted to Watson. Watson didn't work out because they didn't have the deep learning benefits that we do today. So they're spinning down Watson, as far as I know, or pivoting it. I don't know. But anyways, IBM is going all in. They're looking to the horizon and they're saying quantum computing is the next big thing in computing. And so what they're going to do is they're focusing on that, and they have the money and the expertise to do it. So I think that quantum computing, 2023, obviously it may or may not be like commercially viable by then. But I think that we're going to see some really good advancements on quantum computing in 2023. We'll have a better idea as to who's closer to succeeding. Again, my money's on IBM. Time will tell. So that's one thing. Now the question is like, okay, so what? Like, what does quantum computing do that other things can't? And part of that is we have to actually figure it out, because the field of quantum computing and quantum algorithms is still being explored. And it's difficult to explore until you have the machine to do it, right? Similar to like some of the original mathematicians who predicted what computers could do had to do it all with pencil and paper. And there's only so much that you can do to predict what uses of a machine you can have. Like, when we got to punch cards and stuff, and then compilers, it's not immediately obvious what you can do with a computational engine when it is still hypothetical or theoretical, like quantum computing is. So right off the top, materials science, AI modeling. Like, one of the things that I thought was really cool that some people predict quantum computing could do is where you give it a whole bunch of data and it just magically pops out the AI model. It fits all the parameters for your neural network, like with basically no training time, because it superposition and everything settles into the lowest energy state, so on and so forth. You could do the same thing with materials, right? And we'll get back to the power of AI and materials in a minute. But in general, I think that modeling really complex systems like economics, material science, that sort of thing, and cryptography are probably going to be the first things. But I also suspect that because quantum computing is kind of specialized in the same way that like GPUs are specialized, if we can ever get quantum computing down onto a single chip operating at room temperature, it will probably be a companion chip, like you have a GPU and a TPU sitting alongside your CPU, right? And then you'll have a QPU, a quantum processing unit. So I suspect, and this is way more than like 5 or 10 years, right? This is like 10 to 20 to maybe 50 years into the future, once quantum computing is miniaturized, and then it serves as a coprocessor that accelerates, other kinds of processing. Anyways, keep an eye on this space. I think that you're going to see this space heating up a little bit. I don't think we're going to have any saltatory breakthroughs just yet, but I could be wrong. I think you'll see some acceleration in 2023 on quantum computing. Now, the surprise entrance. So with acceleration and exponential growth, it's impossible to really predict. So I could be wrong. One thing that I have seen a lot more news on over the last 6 weeks is photonic computing. This is light-based information transfer and computing. And the fact that I see this space accelerating suddenly, we might be close to a saltatory breakthrough in photonic computing, which this would basically gut Moore's law. And the reason is because it has to do with like the thermodynamics of it. But basically the short version is photonic computing has the potential to be 100 or 1,000 times more energy efficient than electron-based computing. So if this happens, then you have like, okay, what if you have photonic neural networks, right? What if you have photonic transistors that operate instead of in the gigahertz range, they operate in the terahertz range, right? What if you suddenly have processors that are 1,000 times faster and 1,000 times less energy? That means that our computing is going to be nearly as efficient as our brains. So our brains, best estimates right now, operate on about our exascale computers, right? The amount of computation that our brain does, 3 pounds of neurons, is about 1 exaflop of processing power. By comparison, the current exascale computers that we have consume about 20 megawatts of power. You compare that to the 20 watts of power that our brain uses, and our brains are literally 1,000,000 times as efficient as the most powerful computers today. Well, if silicon, or if photonic computing is 1,000 times more efficient than silicon, then that means that it's still 1,000 times more energy intensive than our brains, but that's 1,000x rather than 1,000,000x, right? So these kinds of breakthroughs, again, it's really difficult to predict what's going to happen, because suddenly, if this happens, then let's assume that the cost is commensurate, right? So, your GPU today, if you switch that to a photonic GPU, suddenly you have 8K graphics running at 1,000 frames per second and 8 quadrillion vertices or planes. What is it? Pixels? I don't remember the term for graphics. Anyways, you're going to have graphics that are sharper than your vision, right? If you have a photonic, graphics card. Another thing that could happen is all the large language models that we're using today that cost millions of dollars to train, instead of millions of dollars to train, they cost thousands of dollars to train. And then instead of costing pennies to run per minute, they cost 1,000th of a penny per minute to run. They become trivial, right? If the cost of AI becomes trivial, even what we have today, if you lower the cost of running it by a factor of 10 or 100 or 1,000, excuse me, a little stuffy, then business is not going to be able to adopt AI fast enough. It's going to be run as fast as you can, implement as much as you can, because the marginal cost of this stuff is near zero. Again, marginal cost. And then imagine if the power cost also reaches near zero because of renewables and fusion. So this is where you get those compounding returns between energy and computation, because then you have more AI that is able to model fusion better. You have better AI that's able to help you design better batteries, right? Better solar panels, better medicine, and you get these compounding returns, particularly between computation, specifically AI and deep learning, and energy, where you get this positive feedback loop, and then it just away it goes until you hit some kind of point of diminishing return. So I want to touch on that real quick. Is, yes, it looks like we're accelerating exponentially right now, but the question is, are we going to follow a hyperbolic curve where it just accelerates to infinity? Are we going to take a parabolic curve? Or are we going to follow a sigmoid curve? Personally, I talk to a lot of scientists friends, and they see that once a space is fully explored, research slows down. So we should expect to see diminishing returns. This is always true. Pretty much everything follows diminishing returns. It's just a matter of where on that sigmoid growth curve are we at? Have we passed that midpoint where the acceleration is going to start decelerating? In a lot of these spaces, particularly AI, fusion, and computing, I think we're still on the ramp up. So I think that in these spaces we're going to continue accelerating, and that will have bleed over effects to things like medicine, genetics, and material science. Which again, it's darn near impossible to predict the knock-on effects from all these, especially once they start working together. Right. So that's it on that aspect. So a few other things in the AI space. This is what I mean by when you mix things, right? So an experimental CRISPR technique has cured this 13-year-old of cancer. I am seeing more and more articles like this where some AI-driven biotech solution has done something that was thought impossible. Another one cured or prevented pancreatic cancer, right? And so particularly, so the net effect is okay, so what does it do for me, right? Do I care about quantum computing or AI or deep learning? If you're a ordinary Joe or Jane, you might not care because it's not going to affect you. The difference is, what if suddenly we have an mRNA vaccine that prevents all cancer? That is within the realm of possibility. Or in this case, a therapy. I think that this one, it was genetically edited immune cells, right? So what if by the end of 2023 we are starting to see cancer vaccines or other rejuvenation therapies, kind of stem cell therapies or immune therapies that basically cure everything? There is, along the same lines of this, there's an mRNA vaccine being worked on in New Zealand, I think, that cures, prevents all high cholesterol with an mRNA vaccine. Who would have predicted that? So that's what I mean by some of these advancements, you can't predict what's going to be solved by it. So all we can do is guess. But the pattern that I'm seeing is the combination of CRISPR, AI, and mRNA vaccines. I think that we will basically solve, maybe not by the end of 2023, but not long after, we're going to solve pretty much all disease, whether it's cancer, autologous diseases like high cholesterol, or aging in general. We might have a lot of progress towards basically preventing all forms of death by the end of 2023. I think that, and again, when you look at the market, right? Market forces say, hey, there is so much money on the table here. If you are the first one across the finish line and you can patent a pill or an injection that cures these things, you have the next billion-dollar pharmaceutical company, right? So the race is on to get these things done. And this is where AI, like AlphaFold, we'll get to that in just a second. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. So here's another example. Oh, this is the one that I was talking about. Pancreatic cancer. So, using AI to model these things, same story. So let's just move on because it's I'm going to be in danger of repeating myself. AlphaFold. I think AlphaFold is going to be remembered as one of the most important innovations. And so this is where it's like, okay, yes, it's deep learning, it's AI, but so what, right? AlphaFold 3, when that comes out and it's, cheaper, more efficient, and can model interactions and shapes and other stuff, whatever happens, we're going to see, this is the technology that actually allows for personalized genetic medicine, because then you take your genome, you say, okay, let's simulate your particular proteins, and we can figure out which of your proteins are misfolding or are not present enough, and we can fix that. We can teach your body to make that protein, or give you the right stem cells to make that protein or to fix that protein. And this, I mean, again, the number of things that this unlocks, like we might have a therapy to prevent Alzheimer's, right? Because Alzheimer's is a protein problem where you have plaques that accumulate because they're not cleaned up properly. Okay, we can probably fix that. Same thing with pretty much all heart disease, all cancer, and gosh, I mean, well, you talk to a microbiologist, and like pretty much all disease comes down to misfolding proteins, or designing proteins that do particular things, and that includes immunology and allergies, right? Food intolerances. What if you have Crohn's disease or IBS and leaky gut syndrome or whatever, and it's like, oh, we just need to give your intestines, what is it, epithelial cells, epithelial cells that can produce the right enzyme to digest that. So then suddenly you don't have any chronic inflammatory issues, right? Again, these are all things that I see are within the realm of possibility. I would not be surprised if we see more and more announcements like this in 2023. All right. So finally, I've talked a lot about VC and investment, because here's the thing. You always see like scientists, have unlocked this potential, and then nothing comes of it. Why? It's so frustrating, right? Where, in theory, something is scientifically proven to work or demonstrated. The difference is from theory to commercial application. It has to be financially viable, and it also has to pass muster for a lot of regulatory bodies like the FDA. So the reason that I'm bringing up this is because ChatGPT, super popular, this is like a watershed moment for people to invest in AI. Remember in my last video, if you watched it was just about ChatGPT, was that it kind of proves that it's possible, right? It brings it front and center. And so then what you have is you have a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out. And so then everyone and their brother who has any money is like, hey, Facebook is going the way of the dinosaurs. Even Google might be in trouble. So they're pulling their money out of those tech giants, and they're going to be looking for startups, right? They're going to be looking to the horizon saying, okay, who's doing good stuff with AI? And so this was, particularly this year, was a watershed moment. And so what we're going to see in 2023 is we're basically seeing the beginning of the next .com revolution. This is the AI revolution, where everyone and their brother is going to be doing AI startups, and there's going to be billions and billions of dollars going around. You're going to see spectacular collapses. You're going to see mergers and acquisitions. The big players are going to vacuum them up, right? Google, Microsoft, IBM, and others, probably Honeywell, GE. All of the big tech companies, Raytheon, they're going to be buying up AI companies, startups left and right. And in the meantime, all the speculation is going to be out there. Again, you might be thinking, so what? What does this change for me? Well, one thing that it might change for you is the thing that's going to be impacted the most is the nature of work. So, a lot of folks, myself included, have long said AI is going to destroy all jobs, and there is a rising chorus calling for like a 4-day work week or a 3-day work week. one of the reasons that that will happen is because worker output, like economic output, has continued to increase while labor input has either flattened or tapered off, actually, in some industries. This is going to accelerate that. So what happens when the productivity per hour of labor on average, aggregate, like goes up 10x from what it is today? How much are we actually going to need to be working? That's a non-trivial question. But then there's other questions like, okay, how do you ensure that everyone gets what they need? Do you do some kind of redistribution or credit system or whatever? Do you redistribute the labor? That's one of the reasons that some economists are calling for shorter work weeks is, hey, let's just cut everyone's week in half and then you have twice as many people that you hire, right? So that you redistribute the work rather than redistribute the capital. I don't know if that's going to work. Or that I don't think that's a complete solution. I think that because some people are just going to be pushed out of the labor market entirely, and ChatGPT proves that. I don't have the article brought up, but there was one that said ChatGPT passed the bar, right? It passed a practice test for the bar. So if ChatGPT is smart enough to pass the bar exam, which is how you become a lawyer, what else is it smart enough to do? Is it smart enough to be a doctor? Is it smart enough to take my job, my day job as an IT technologist? Possibly. So then, if you have this technology that is infinitely cheaper to run, even as expensive as it is to run, it is infinitely cheaper than human labor, right? The marginal cost of AI versus human labor is like, it's 1,000,000 times cheaper to run, right? Because you can get an expert opinion from AI. Granted, there's still problems with confabulation, which I'll show you. I'll end this on that problem because as optimistic as I am, there are still some very large problems to overcome with this technology before it's ready for game time, right? Before it's ready to take center stage, there are some problems to overcome. However, the potential is there. Okay, so what is that potential? If you can do high value intellectual human labor with a machine that costs a few pennies to run per minute, whereas the cost of a doctor is about $10 or $20 per minute. That's how much their time is worth. Let's see, because if someone charges, let's say $600 an hour, that's $10 a minute is how much their time is worth. So that's a specialist lawyer, or actually that's an average lawyer and like a specialist doctor, right? Or a experienced physician. So let's just say that expert human labor is about $600 an hour, but this can perform the same number of tasks, one, faster, because these things spit out text real fast, and then it only takes a few cents. So then you're looking at something that is like 60,000 times cheaper than the human expert. Again, marginal cost of medicine could drop to near zero. Can you imagine? What if your medical bills per year is like $10? then it's like, okay, it's practically free, right? What if your legal bills or your financial, like, getting your taxes done and your CPA, what if all that is, cost $10 a year maximum? It's really difficult to see what's going to happen. And then the question is, okay, people see that value. And so, if that's the cost of providing that service, and there's multiple people offering that service, I know I can hear some of you. This is what I stopped. I was like, my mental model of the audience is like, oh yeah, but if there's that much value to be bought, to be gained, someone's going to squeeze, right? Someone's going to say, I'm going to jack up the price. The difference is all of the open source people making sure that access to this technology is democratized. So you've got NVIDIA, you've got Microsoft, you've got Google, you've got Eleuther, right? You've got Hugging Face, you've got all kinds of players, both for-profit and not for-profit. You've got open source players all competing to make sure that this stuff is accessible to everyone. And that is going to really, really push down the cost of these models and these services. And again, remember earlier, all the leaps forward that we're going to see in computing means that even these big expensive models are going to be 10 times cheaper to train, 100 times cheaper to run. And this is in the next year or two, right? So we're going to see this exponential early growth of, or I guess exponential decrease in cost, right? exponential decay in terms of marginal cost to run and train these things, which means everyone's going to be able to access it. Like my 3-year-old GPU is big enough to run Stable Diffusion, right? And so people are going to refine these models, get them more efficient, more cheap, and that means everyone's going to be able to run it. Every startup, every company, even people at home are going to be able to run these models. And it is impossible to say what that's going to do to not just the economy, but your day-to-day life. Because again, imagine that you get to, age 50, 60, 70, and they take a sample of blood, run your genome, and say, okay, you need this, and this mRNA vaccine. We're going to cure your Alzheimer's. We're going to cure your high blood pressure, your cholesterol, and also your what is it? The brittle bones. I can't remember the word right now. Anyways, like that is within the realm of possibility, and I'm not saying like that personalized medicine. 10 years maximum, 2030 maximum, probably 2027 if I had to guess right now, just the way that things are accelerating at an exponential rate. Again, is it going to be exponential forever, or are we going to get diminishing returns? We will get diminishing returns, but especially in the field of energy and AI, we are not anywhere near the top, especially when you get the compounding returns from advances in computing. Okay, I'm repeating myself. Lastly, I had someone ask me to comment on this, the building a virtual machine inside ChatGPT. So this is where, yes, it's really cool, but there are problems to solve. So the problem is confabulation, making stuff up. When you have the ability to be infinitely creative, it is a double-edged sword because you need to be creative to solve problems like cancer, like climate change. However, if you are creative without constraints, so that's the key thing, is I guess a way of understanding confabulation, it is creativity without any constraints. Then you just kind of go off into la la land and it's a dream world. And so that's what this person did, where he said, I want you to act as a Linux terminal. So this machine helpfully says, okay, I'm now a Linux terminal. And everything you see from here is pretend. It's not actually a virtual machine. It just understands the behavior of the virtual machine well enough to be able to emulate that behavior, to pretend, right? Which is a really great capacity, right? I don't want to say that this is bad. This is good. The fact that it is capable of doing this, that it understands things this well, is and can pretend, that means that it's got a very good mental model, like an internal model of the world of machines. So what this means is this model, ChatGPT, understands technology well enough to pretend. And if you have enough familiarity with something to emulate it, to simulate it, that means you have enough ability to reproduce it and to anticipate what it's going to do, right? So again, like this is like, it's a double-edged sword because this level of capacity can be, it can be dangerous because how is it doing that, right? It's a black box. I mean, human brains are black boxes too, and we have ways of testing humans to make sure that that we know what's going on. But without the right constraints or guardrails, basically what I'm saying is we need to spend a lot of time testing this and ensuring that that we give it those constraints and guardrails so that it is connected to reality. Right now, this is all just hallucinating, disconnected from reality, right? It's not embodied. It's not interacting with us except through a very, very narrow pipe, right, of bits and bytes. We're not giving these models cameras, microphones, robotic chassis. They don't have a ground truth reality to interact with yet. They're only getting the data that we're giving them. And then so it's like, imagine a brain in a jar, right? It's dark. There's only one way in, one way out, and it's through a line of Morse code. That's basically how these models exist right now. So they have no idea what is going on in the outside world, in the real world. And that's what I mean by constraints. You and I, our brains are finely calibrated to interact with the real world through our bodies, right? your brain in a jar, I mean, that's all it is. It goes out through your brainstem and a few other nerves. And so it has input and output. And the physical world is our primary constraint, right? And the feedback that we get through our bodies. And that is how our brains learn to like identify what is real and solid and factual to the best of its ability. Obviously, like you can argue, until the cows come home about what a fact is or what the truth is. But the fact of the matter is our brains do good enough to be functional. Right now, these models are not connected to physical reality, to our physical reality. We can change that by giving them simulated realities, which again, that'll get easier as computation gets cheaper and energy gets cheaper. We can give them simulated realities, like plug it into the Unreal Engine. You can also do text-based simulation. I've tried that, which is pretty interesting. But then you can also put it in robotic chassis, and then it can, kind of go through a pedagogical, learning phase where it can, kind of experiment with what is it that I'm capable of and learn via feedback loops. Right now, though, it's kind of in la la land. What direction are we going to go? I don't know. There's infinite number of directions we can go from here. And basically all I'm saying is once you've got something that is this intelligent, it's going to take a while to put the right wrapper around it in order to make sure that it is stable and reliable. Because if it's capable of imagining that it's a virtual machine right now, then like, okay, how do you know that these are real results, right? That's kind of the point, is like, this is a very, very vivid imagination. It's not connected to reality. And so that's why it's a double-edged sword. Good imagination, not grounded in reality yet. I think that's kind of the core assertion that I'm making here. Anyways, all that being said is everything that I showed today, this time last year, would have been a pipe dream. This, no one would have believed you. 12 months ago, you showed someone this, they would have said BS. Not possible. That's 10 years away minimum. 15 years away probably. So if we are at the knee of the curve and we're accelerating, who knows where we'll be at this time next year in terms of AI. I think that AGI, we'll still be debating about what AGI means, but I think that we will agree that 2023, in the future, looking back, 2023 is the year of AGI. Then it's only a matter of how fast it is, how cheap it is to run, because right now it's going to be prohibitively expensive to run and train. But the question is not going to be whether or not we have AGI, but how fast it is, how cheap it is, and how what age level it's at, right? Because some of these capacities are already above like 10-year-old reasoning, right? 10-year-old human. So, it's going to be like, okay, you can do anything, equal to like a 15-year-old or 20-year-old or 30-year-old, right? And then we're going to need entirely different measurements. Like IQ, that's probably not a good measurement of measuring how intelligent AGI is. That's part of the problem, is we don't have a good way of measuring it. Anyways, I'm rambling now, so I'll call it a day. But yeah, this is my recap of where we're at right now at the end of 2022, and extrapolating and anticipating where we're going to be at in the next 12 months. Thanks for watching.